Foucault on power. Why society controls you. Have you ever stopped to really think about control? Not the dramatic, big-screen villain in a castle kind, but the quiet, everyday kind that subtly shapes your decisions, your aspirations, and even your thoughts? That's the territory of Michel Foucault, a revolutionary philosopher who completely flipped the script on how we understand power. Forget the old model where power is a top-down, oppressive force held by kings and governments. Foucault argued that this traditional view misses the forest for the trees. The anatomy of power, a capillary flow. Foucault's most groundbreaking idea is that power isn't a thing you possess. It's a network of relations that permeate every level of society. He described it as capillary, meaning it flows like tiny vessels reaching every corner of the social body. Think of it not as a mighty dam, but as the constant circulating current of a vast ocean. Productive power. The most crucial shift is seeing power as productive, not just repressive. It doesn't just say no. It actively creates and produces realities, subjects, knowledge, and acceptable behaviors. The systems and institutions we live in, schools, hospitals, prisons, and even your morning exercise routine, don't just restrict you. They construct who you are as a citizen, a student, a patient, or a consumer. Power, knowledge, savoir, pouvoir. For Foucault, power and knowledge are two sides of the same coin. There is no power relation without the constitution of a field of knowledge, and no knowledge that doesn't presuppose and constitute power relations. This means that truth itself is an effect of power. What we accept as scientific fact or normal behavior is established and maintained by institutions that have the authority to define it. Psychology, for example, is a knowledge that defines what constitutes the sane versus the mad, thereby creating categories for society to manage and control. The panopticon, the engine of self-control. Foucault used the architectural design of the panopticon, a proposed prison design by Jeremy Bentham, as the ultimate metaphor for modern disciplinary society. The design. In the panopticon, a central tower allows a single guard to observe all inmates without the inmates knowing if they are actually being watched at any given moment. The effect. The genius of the panopticon is that the guard doesn't need to be there constantly. The mere possibility of surveillance is enough to induce a state of conscious and permanent visibility. The individual becomes their own guard. They internalize the gaze of authority and police their own behavior. This is subjection, being made into a subject who governs themselves according to the rules of the system. Beyond the prison. Foucault argued that this disciplinary mechanism extends far beyond the prison walls. Modern society is a network of panoptic mechanisms. Consider social media. You constantly curate and monitor your own profile, knowing your actions are visible and judged by a peer-to-peer and institutional gaze. This isn't external oppression. It's an internalized, self-regulating form of control. The rise of discipline and the normalizing judgment. The shift from the spectacular, public violence of pre-modern power, like public executions, to the quiet efficiency of modern power is key. Modern power works through discipline. Disciplinary institutions, starting in the 17th and 18th centuries, institutions like the school, the military, the factory, and the hospital developed techniques for the detailed, precise control of the body. These techniques focus on the distribution of individuals in space, assigning specific places, desks in a classroom, beds in a ward. The control of activity, establishing rigid timetables and schedules, the factory whistle, the school bell. Organization of geneses, time, dividing time into smaller, measurable segments for efficient learning or production. The curriculum, the assembly line. The normalizing judgment. This is where society exerts its most subtle control. Discipline establishes a norm, e.g., the average student, the productive worker, the mentally stable person. We are then constantly measured against this norm. Those who deviate are subjected to a normalizing judgment, a judgment not based on a legal code, but on how far they fall from the established standard. This judgment is corrective and seeks to remold the individual back into the accepted social form, often without the need for physical force. Resistance and freedom, the counter-tactics. If power is everywhere, does that mean resistance impossible? Absolutely not. For Foucault, where there is power, there is resistance. Resistance as a localized point. Since power is a network of relations, resistance must also be mobile, tactical, and localized. It is not a massive battle against a single entity, but a constant series of small-scale, strategic engagements at the points where power is most clearly exercised. The refusal to be governed. Freedom isn't about escaping power entirely, which Foucault found impossible. It's about the refusal of a particular form of subjection. It is the perpetual practice of critically examining the systems that define you and finding ways to act differently within them. Every time you consciously choose to reject a normal path, be it a career, a lifestyle, or a way of thinking, you are engaging in a moment of Foucauldian resistance. It's an ongoing process of self-creation against the forces of social normalization. It's the daily intellectual struggle to know how you are governed and by whom, and then to question the very necessity of that governance. So, the next time you feel a pull toward conformity or an internal critique about not measuring up, remember Foucault. Understand that society doesn't control you with chains and whips, but with the pervasive, quiet power of knowledge, normalization, and the gaze you've learned to turn upon yourself. True freedom, then, is the act of seeing those capillaries of power, understanding how they flow, and constantly redrawing the map of your own self. If this deep dive into the hidden mechanics of control sparked a connection with your own experiences, give us a sign. Smash that like button to signal your intellectual resistance to the normalized scrolling patterns. Subscribe to join our growing collective of critical thinkers pushing past the surface-level narratives. And most importantly, drop a comment below sharing which social norm you've decided to push back again. Let's make this space a hub for genuine, anti-panoptic discussion.